I'm Appie Sluis, and this is PNN. This time, not from the drill ship JOIDES Resolution, but from the IODP core repository in College Station, Texas. Here, in this gigantic fridge, about 100 kilometers of core recovered from the ocean floor are stored. Here, the scientists are taking thousands of samples of the unique material that was drilled during the PEAT expeditions. This sampling party is the start of mind-blowing new findings, because in the coming years, the scientists will reveal all the secrets of the ancient Pacific Ocean. Only on PNN.
This is PNN.
We are now in the so-called Gulf Coast repository of the Integrated Ocean Drilling Program.
Well, we're in the midst of a week-long sampling party.
So a sampling party sounds like it's a lot of fun, which it can be, but it's not really a party. It's actually 1 week or 7 days of really hard work.
The cruise that we are sampling for this week was actually 2 back-to-back expeditions, each of 2 months. And their focus was drilling in the eastern equatorial Pacific region, looking at sediments that were deposited on the old equator, going back from present day all the way back to about 55 million years ago.
We spent 2 months at sea collecting many sediment cores, and they're already described at a basic level on the ship by the scientists that are sailing. But of course, to conduct the high-resolution and in-depth individual studies by the scientists that study these cores, we actually have to physically now take samples from these cores to tell us the full story of what the rocks and muds contain in the shape of a history book.
The sampling party is usually a very focused 1-week time period where we have at least half of the scientists from the ship arrive. And with the support of our repository staff, we put in long days to simply go through tens of thousands of samples from thousands of meters of core.
So one other reason to take the samples here by the scientists who actually are going to use them is also to make sure that the samples are of good quality. They have seen the story from the beginning, and we want to make sure that they can continue their scientific adventure all the way to the end when it comes out in the form of scientific publications. During the ship, we undertook relatively low resolution analyses of the sediments that we obtained. And the low resolution story might tell you, for example, that overall during the last 65 million years, the Earth has undergone a period of global cooling on very general terms. However, the climatic history has changed on many different timescales. Just like there are seasons, winter and summer, that fluctuates on a yearly basis. And so on different timescales that range from years to millions of years, there are different cycles in Earth's climate. And if you sample at low resolution, you don't see these high frequency fluctuations. And so we really have to look at very high resolution time series, which we are now producing post-cruise, to really see many of these events that happen maybe only over very short periods of time, yet that are very important or an important feature of the climatic system in the past.
In total, we have about 330 kilometers of core, and this goes back to starting in 1968 with the Deep Sea Drilling Project, followed by the Ocean Drilling Program, and now the Integrated Ocean Drilling Program. So 41 years of scientific ocean drilling.
So maybe I can give you an example from my own personal experience. One of the previous times when I went to sea, I obtained a sample set of 800 samples to conduct a high-resolution study of climate in the past. Each single sample has to be carefully washed, has to be prepared, it has to be sieved, has to be dried, and then finally tiny microfossils have to be picked out of these sieved sediments. And so for each sample, one would probably spend maybe 10 hours or so processing and analyzing those samples. Now, if you multiply that by 800, you can easily work on these samples for 1 year, for 2 years, sometimes for 3 years. And that's the data generation period. What then follows is the writing up of the scientific results and the interpretation. And before then the results are published, it could be another 2 or 3 years or so. And so there's a very, very long process from the first time when the drilling proposal is written, which was in our case 6 years ago, to the future when the first results are going to be published. Now the shipboard results some of them will be published in the next few months or maybe in the next year, but some of these high-resolution studies probably will take 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years before they are then appearing in the open literature.
There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is, I finally have my samples. The bad news, however, is that you have watched the very final episode of PNN. And remember, all news, even if it's 55 million years old, travels fast, but only on PNN. I'd like to thank all PNN fans, and hopefully I will see you again on yet another fascinating IODP expedition.
This is PNN.